Welcome back to the Munn Avenue Muse podcast presented to you by MunnAvenuePress.com. We publish books for authors around the world, design covers, interiors, edit, proofread, and do all the other little details that make for successful book selling. And one of our favorite authors is my guest today, Carol Bluestein, who has written and published 6 books. They're terrific political thrillers, and I'll tell you just a little bit briefly about Carol. Carol has a background in education, sales, marketing, consulting, computers, arts, theater administration, current events, photography, gardening, and caregiving, dogs and people, as well as her family, 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Gives her a rich and unique perspective evident in her thoughtful, exciting, unique, contemporary, and entertaining work. And that's not an exaggeration. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you.
So tell us, you've done all of these different amazing things. Of all of those interests, which one did you enjoy doing the most?
I thought about that because I did get the questions in advance. And I can tell you which one was not my favorite. Because the rest of them involve puzzle solving and figuring things out. And that can keep me entertained for years. But I'm not really fond of duplicating work over and over and over again. So administration, I revitalized 2 cultural centers. And that was a lot of administration and a lot of getting to know the artists. A lot of it was fun, but every year you're never in the moment. You're always planning what's going to happen next time. You're always taking notes for what's going to happen next. But programming and even the education and writing, there's a finite piece to it. You're finished with this book, you can start the next book. You get done with things. When in administration, you never get done. And I'm not a never get done person.
Well, it takes quite a bit of determination and fortitude to write a novel, and you've written 6 of them. So what inspired you to write Seduction, which was the first one, and Transition, which is the other one that came out recently?
I have always stayed away from politics because always in my formative years, stayed away from politics because I felt politicians were self-serving. And when I tried to communicate with them on several occasions, they wrote me back and said, they have to vote their heart. So I'm not really interested in them voting their heart. I'm interested in them representing their constituency, and putting my letter on the stack that says yes and others on no, and then compare and, do what's best for the people that they represent. So I always had a feeling that there was a bigger thing going on. I started Seduction after I joined a women's writing group, and I was reading a book, an anthology, and I was very touched by the fact that people were referring back to their legacy, whether there were, whatever their background, they were going back to their legacies. And their legacies were often in slavery or in pogroms or in places where there was no freedom. So coming to freedom was a big part of their presentation. And my entitled little self was sitting on a back porch reading it, and I go, geez, I wish I had a background like that, because then I could write. And then I just kind of hit myself in the head, and I said, the background of my ancestry is all about coming out of oppression. So I said I could write this. And I could write about, and I wrote a poem, and the poem was Never Again. Never again should we see war. Never again should we be fighting and torturing each other. And never again should we be sightless when it comes to looking at humanity and be only self-serving, because that causes the problem. And after I wrote the poem, I read a book by one of the guild members, and it says, you can write a book. And I said, oh, okay, challenge accepted. And I started to put together a book. It came pretty easily. It's called Seduction, because seduction happens in many forms, which are all, not all, but I think I got to a lot of issues of seduction, because
it's not just sexual seduction, which you might think of when you hear that word. There's other
That's
forms.
Right.
Yes.
That's right. And that kind of intrigued me too. And I had been through depression when my husband died, so I had that, which is a problem for the main character in that book. So that's about coming into your own power and finding the resources to do what you have to do. It's a journey, and I have to say that looking back on that book, everybody is trying to do good, but they're doing it good for themselves, they think it's for the greater good, but what's good doesn't mean the same thing to different people.
Sure.
So it's about being undermined and overcoming, and there's love in there. There's a breakout African nation, which I happen to love that story. And that came from Haiti. So a lot of the things in my book reference things that were going on in the world. My main character is assaulted, and they were on campus, and that was a big thing back then. It's probably still a big thing, but we've gone the circle of, oh my God, it's terrible, we'll tell everybody. Now we're not going to tell anybody anymore, because they want kids to feel safe on campus. But it's a big deal. And there was a big outcry in a movie on PBS. And then there was the problem of UN delegates who came to this country and felt totally empowered to do anything they want because our laws didn't apply to them. So I get pissed off at this stuff, and the only way I can get it out is through my writing.
Well, you told me once that your inspiration was anger. You were angry.
That's right.
Right. And that drove you to write, which I thought was very interesting. And the subtitle of all your books and the series is Love, Loss, Leverage, Murder. Talk a little bit about those four things.
Oh.
And how they play into your stories.
Well, I have a couple of pairs of characters who are married to each other. And how does love play out? I think it's there until it's not. I think my characters assume they're loved until it turns out maybe they're not. Or they're not loved in the way they want to be loved, because there's different signals for that. And it's about friendship. It's about, gosh, in all the books, I think they grow and change. And so the word grows and changes. But underneath everything, there's a basic love that keeps them working together. Yeah, they get mad and they get angry and they throw things, but it's about love of self. It's about love of another person. It's about love of country. It's about love of mission, about love of a greater vision. I think I have a lot of vision things, people who see a little further than they're supposed to. Because without vision, I don't think we're moving forward. And I think part of the problem that we face today is that people don't have a vision, because we keep most of the country mired in subsistence living.
Yeah.
And when you're living without basic needs, it's hard to have a vision and something to follow.
Why thrillers as a genre? What
Hmm.
made you write these stories as thrillers? I mean, murder is the fourth item in your subtitle.
Yes, and
What?
I murder a lot of people. I do. And it's kind of fun, I got to say, because I'm not allowed to do that in real life.
Yeah, I was an author who I loved this tagline. She said what she did was she wrote romances with high body counts.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably somewhat characteristic of your book too.
Yes, because I think the people who don't care really don't care. And if you have as your not, antagonist someone who cares about people, it's very hard to murder. But if you have antagonists that puts themselves first and people are collateral damage, which is the basic precept in the world, actually. Our leaders put the people of their country as pawns and not as human beings. And I believe the truth is that if everybody had their basic needs met, we'd be in much better shape and we'd be much more cooperative and we wouldn't be starving in some countries and not in others. There'd be a sharing because there'd be empathy and understanding that people who don't have to worry about feeding their children, which every country wants, by the way, they want people to have children because the world population is decreasing, a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing is there are going to be no workers to support all the retired people. You know, it's a whole big deal.
Right, right.
So they're trying to get women to have children in very odd ways. China's paying money. United States is taking away health care. You know, it's bizarre, actually. And we don't put a lot of value in raising those children. So we don't put a lot of value in education, and we don't put a lot of value in school care and preschool care so people can afford to live. Anyway.
So transition is your latest.
Did I answer the question? That's
Yeah, you did.
okay. All right.
So transition is your latest book. Is there a short passage you might be willing to read and share with us?
Oh, that's the one thing I didn't do, a short passage. No, I don't write short passages.
Okay, we'll skip that part, Chris. We'll go on. We don't have to do that.
I write longer passages, but I don't want to take up 3 minutes.
No. We won't do that. So, Carol, what has the
I'm sorry.
um,
It's beautifully written, though. I have to say.
well, it is. Um,
No, I'm just telling. I want to tell the audience that it's beautifously written, and you
and
shouldn't be afraid.
engaging, and you
And
should
it's
read
meant
it.
to be, and it's meant to be read.
Yeah, and it is available. The Seduction series and Transition, Love, Loss, Leverage, Murder is available on Amazon right now, as is the whole series.
I
I'm
have
calling
my
her
bookmark.
Carol, but it is C.L. Bluestein is the author. What's the writing and publishing experience been like for you? The whole journey, what's that been like?
The first book took me 5 years because although I wrote a fabulous first draft, I I failed to understand that the heroine had to be proactive as opposed to reactive. Because I'm more of a reactive than a proactive, and that's not terribly interesting to people. So I had to be the person I want to be as opposed to the person I live. So that was interesting for me. Then I could do anything I wanted, which was really fun. I could slay dragons. I could, make changes. I could save the world. And yeah, I did. So that was very interesting to come into.
I think part of what you hit on there, which is very interesting, and I find to be the case when I write too, is that um, writing, other than accomplishing it, the act of writing is quite cathartic, isn't it? I mean, you kind
Yes,
of work out a lot of, you know, I find in my writing, I'm dealing with some demons, and you
that's right.
kind of work through them. And it's a great sort of self-reflective thing to finish a writing session and say, well, where did that come from? Where did that idea come from? Where did that nasty villain come from? Yeah, yeah. So I think when that transition you talked about from writing in a way about yourself to writing about someone that you would like to be, I think is very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, and I took improv for a year, and the whole basis of improv is you say "and" to whatever is presented to you. So there's no buts. You're not going to fight the person. You're going to go along with the idea. And I found using that in writing is wonderful, and it takes me places I don't know I didn't expect to go, because someone says something and I go and they react, and I allow them, because I don't write a lot of what people are thinking, because for me, thinking doesn't do anything to the story. It doesn't move it forward. It's a whole interior emotional thing that I don't know is appropriate to the story. Might be just not the way I write. And people get to say out loud what they're thinking. So they can say, don't you dare do that, as opposed to thinking, don't you dare do that, and saying, that's nice, honey. You get the difference, because eventually they're going to have to say, don't you dare do that. They're just not willing to say it then. So I don't wait for that. I just put it out there. And that puts me in some interesting places. And I always say, why did I go here? Because I went there for a reason that
Yeah,
I
and
know.
you mentioned something else there too, which is I talk about a lot, is as a writer, and particularly as a thriller writer, your number one job is to move the story forward,
Right,
not to stall,
right.
because the reader turning the page is what it's all about. And if they stop or get bored, or you give them too much background information or too many flashbacks and they get lost in the story and just put it aside, well, then all is lost.
That's right.
So, and that's true actually of every genre. If you're reading a nonfiction book and you put it down, then whatever the message was or the story was is lost. And I mentioned a interview I heard recently with R.L. Stine, who wrote the Goosebump books,
Hmm.
and they asked him, and I had this question too, because my sixth book is a children's book, and the question was, is there a message? What are you trying to do in your books? Is there a message for the kids? And his answer was, all I want them to do is turn the page, turn the page. Well, it goes to, okay, I'm going to sell a lot of books that way, but also engage. You want your readers to be engaged and read a lot. Now, I think you emailed me a number, but you sold a lot of books, right? What was like the
Um,
number?
since you've been promoting me, which was basically when I started selling books, forget what the figure is. 38,876
Yeah,
or something.
something like that.
I
Yeah,
think one
yeah.
more promotion and I'll be over 4,000, 40,000,
40,000. Yeah. Yeah, which
which is
is
amazing, because our goal was to, my goal was to get it into as many people's hands as possible.
yeah,
And we've done that.
you want to be read. And the other thing we touched on too recently, and I think about this from time to time because I have three grandchildren, you have seven. Writing a book is going to kind of live a lot longer than we are,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that I could read something my grandmother or grandfather wrote, because your personality and what you care about, and even though it's fiction, it's all reflected in what you write.
That's right.
And someday, when your grandchildren are old enough, they're going to pick up seduction or transition or
Right. Right.
execution. And they're probably going to say, I had this reaction from a friend of mine too, like with reading one of my thrillers, is this is a pretty sick, strange person. But I say that as a joke, but the a lot of personality comes through in your writing and my writing, and our grandkids will appreciate, I think, knowing that, okay, there they are. And also, writing a book is a big effort. I mean, I know it took you 5 years for the first one. The others probably came faster,
They
about a
did.
year or so
Because you have to
each.
learn how to do it.
Yeah, and
There's a
your
learning
tools
process.
and
Yeah.
techniques, and you get better at it, which you have and I have. My first book, I think, took me 10 years. The other thing, too, with the first book is it's scary because you don't know when you publish that book what's going to happen. Are people going to hate it, like it, whatever? And then when you turn out and you get some good reviews, like your latest book is 4.8 stars. When you get good reviews and you find people like it, then it encourages you to write more, right? I mean,
I haven't looked at that. I already have reviews.
oh yeah, yeah, and you're
Here's the
4.8,
author who's looking for
and
praise,
it's
and I haven't looked.
you have 4.8 stars, yeah, and
Wow.
yeah, I'm looking over sideways here,
I
but
think the whole
yeah,
series is over four. It's like
oh
4.2.
yeah, every one of them is over four. So I like to say, um, when on my first book, when I got my first 5-star review from somebody who wasn't a friend or a relative, I said, "Now an author."
That's right.
That was the tipping point. But up until then, you just don't know, what people are going to think and what people are going to say. And
And if
the
you're
other
going to read
part,
it, see, that's the other thing. You can. There are a lot of authors on the forums that I'm on who don't get read.
well,
You make a book and you put it on Amazon. You're one of what 10 million books,
millions, yeah.
and they're
Uh,
coming out every day.
well, and the other interesting thing I've sort of learned in the last year or two about reviews is, particularly if people are reading on a Kindle, they can't rate your book until they make it to the end, because it's at the end that they give you the star option to rate
Hmm.
the book. So if you're not getting reviews, it means they're not turning the page and they're
Right.
not making it to the end. Now, with fiction, has a little advantage if you write good fiction, in that people want to know how the story ends, if
Hmm.
you've engaged them. Nonfiction, it's tougher because people will dabble in nonfiction, even good nonfiction. They're not going to read it like a from start to finish ending. But we do have some authors, we've had authors not recently who said, "Why am I not getting reviews?" Well, people aren't liking the book. I mean, I hate to deliver bad news, but that happens. That's not true in your case. They're
And
reading your book and your
yeah,
books, and your reviews are terrific. So what are you working on now? What comes next?
I wasn't going to work on anything. I was going to do a lot of self promotion, and then I got hit with a story, so I'm writing a book now.
Book 7, right?
Yeah, reaction.
Okay. And you can see from the titles there's a pattern there. There's a TION pattern.
Well, that's your fault. Do you have I don't have a book in my hand. Do you have one
No,
there?
Chris is going to show a cover. Chris, our wonderful producer, will pop up covers in the
Oh, okay.
video. So,
So
but
that's because of your promotion expertise,
well, we
and we
started
couldn't fit the word
right,
across
right.
the front to the
Yeah, we
size you wanted,
right. Well, we
right?
wanted big fonts so it would stand out in little thumbnails
Okay. Chris
on
is going to do it. Yeah.
Amazon. And we that's part of our sort of design mantra with book covers
Hmm.
because they often appear tiny and you want to be able to read the title. And if you ever want to check this out for yourself, and I'm talking to the authors and readers out there, go to any Amazon book page and then scroll down and look at the little thumbnails and see if you can read the titles. So yes, we want to design beautiful covers, but we want the title to be readable. Now, transition is a long word. So our wonderful designer came up with the idea earlier, starting with seduction of we do SUDUC and then drop the TION so that we can get in the whole word in a
Right.
large
So,
font.
so when I do a bookmark like that, you can see that my titles are all offset. So they have to have the TION ending.
You're stuck with it now.
I'm stuck with it on this series anyway.
And I think we started
And
working
I thought it was very
together.
clever because now you can tell my book when it's lined up with other books. Because,
Well, it's kind of a branding thing now. It's a
yes,
stylistic thing that people know.
yeah,
And when we do a series, and by the way, series are very powerful things. So if you're an author out there and you've written one book, if you write the second book, it's going to help you sell the first book and so on. And then if it's a series that is truly a through story, we like to have some elements that are the same in each cover and then some that are different so that readers of the series feel a sense of familiarity, but then a little excitement about what's new and what's coming. And I have a funny story about that. As I was writing my first book, I was just finishing the manuscript, and I at that time was I had 9 agents interested in my book, but I was talking to one of these agents, and he said to me, is this going to be a series? Now I'm just finishing my first book. I had no idea of that, bet that, but being quick on my feet, I said, "Oh, sure." And saw him perk up, and then I thought, "Oh, well, maybe this should be a series." And then I found, and you probably found something like this too. When I finished the first book, you become very attached to your characters. And in a way, they were human to me. I felt like I owed it to them to continue their story. Did you have that feeling with your characters?
I felt that because I knew my characters, that I could write another book without having to reinvent all the characters.
Well, that's another
So I
advantage
had
of
a,
writing
I,
a series.
so
It
I
gives you a
had,
little head start,
that's
right?
right. So I
Yeah.
knew the characters. If someone read the series, the first book, they would know the characters in the second, and then I would add characters. And the characters that are stable in the series have grown. So if you can read from the beginning to now and you would see the growth, but you don't have to because I make sure every book stands on its own and it finishes. So it's not a cliffhanger. Read the next book or you'll never find out what happened.
No, no,
It's
but
not that at all.
you can read them in any order.
You
I
can read
try
them
to
in
do
any
the
order.
same thing too, but there is a through line, and you develop the characters more. And I do half a dozen live events a year, and I've had people walk up to me and say, "Well, this is a series. Do the same characters appear in the sequential books?" And I say to them, "Well, the ones that survive do."
That's right.
And they usually laugh, but you know, that's part of the thing. And then I think in my third book, I I killed off a favorite character. Well, I got a lot of nasty feedback about that because
Hmm.
people really like this character. Um, and then some of them suspected because of the nature of my plots that maybe they'll come back. I said, no, they're not coming back. So once in a while, you have to kill
But
your
they could.
darlings.
They could if,
Technically, they could. Yeah.
yeah. When mine are
Uh,
dead, they're dead. They're not coming back.
yeah. Well, mine's called Not So Dead. So that's a hint
Yes.
at why that might be possible. Um, and so, what do you like to read? What's on your nightstand? What are you reading now?
I'm not because I'm careful not to read books because I'm afraid I'm going to take things from them when I'm writing. But I spent 70 some odd years reading things like Stephen King, Sue Grafton, Dick Francis, John Grisham, Robin Cook, John Sanford, Patricia Cornwell,
You
Michael
have to.
Connelly. I like procedural novels, and I watch a lot of sorry goes, but I watch a lot of streaming shows that are in the same genre. I don't like when people manipulate others to the point of terror. I don't like making people unable to push against the evil that's coming towards them. So my characters all have agency, and they all have money because poor people generally don't have the same agency as people with an unlimited budget can
Right,
do.
right, right.
Um, so my characters have agency. They affect change. They're trying to create a world of justice, equal justice around, and to fight the oligarchy, which is a persistent antagonist. And then each book, someone from that class breaks away and gets theirs. Yay! but we, but I haven't totally eradicated them because that's going to be a very hard. And I'm a realist in many ways.
Yeah,
So
sure.
so the books that I like, I don't need to see the gore. Just tell me they're dead. I don't mind looking at skeletons and stuff. And then how to solve the problem of who did it. My books are more Columbo like, if anybody remembers that, which is where you know who the killer is in the beginning, but but making them accountable is the rest of the book. So my book tries to hold people accountable for what they do.
Yeah, and
Um,
actually, you mentioned I was thinking of it while you were talking about it. It's funny coincidence. I recently watched a few episodes of Columbo, and the villains are all the one percenters. They're the elite. They're all rich elites that land up being the bad guys.
that's right.
And he's this rumpled up sort of not even middle of the road. He's a low class detective in
You
their
don't invite
eyes.
him for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to go back and watch some of these things. I watched a movie last night from 1990, and it was great. It was called One False Move. The director, Carl Franklin, also directed Devil in the Blue Dress. And you have this growing collision of characters that's going to happen between the antagonists and the protagonists, and it is a high body count, but it's really really well done. So Carol's wonderful books, the Seduction series, Love, Loss, Leverage, and Murder, and the sequels, Perception, Deception, Execution, and Transition are all available on Amazon.com. The first 5 are available at barnesandnoble.com, and Transition should be available by the time this airs
It's
on
all very
Barnes and Noble
exciting.
too. So yeah, and the audiobooks, they were all audiobooks too, because
Yes.
Carol, like me, we're big audiobook fans. She has a wonderful narrator. So if you like audiobooks, check that out.
Her name, let
Uh,
me just say, her name is Crystal Lewis, and she's a wonderful audio actor.
yeah, terrific.
Yeah.
So yeah, so please check out Carol's books. And
Can
if
I
you
just
have,
say one thing?
absolutely.
Okay. That my last 2 books were published with Munn Avenue Press, and this last one, I called to say my book was done, and Charlie said, "You want us to take care of it?" And I said, "What?" He said, "We'll do everything." And I have to say, from a writer's perspective, that is really nice because you can be sitting and writing your next novel if you don't have to go through each step of getting your novel ready for publication. So I thank Munn Avenue Press for that. That was amazing.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much. If you have a book in you and like to talk about it, you can contact me at munavenuepress.com. And we produce books like Carol's and audiobooks and podcasts just like this one. And if you tune in to munavenuemuse.com, or if you have an Apple iPhone or an Amazon Echo device and you say Siri or you say Alexa, play the Munn Avenue Muse podcast, it will come right up. So thank you for joining us and sharing your story. I hope it inspires others as it inspires me. So
Okay. Thank you for
thank
having me.
you.
I appreciate it.